CMMS Radio talks about all things CMMS, computerized maintenance management software, focused on maintenance management. It's the people, the process, and the culture that make your CMMS journey a success. Hey, everybody, welcome back. We are talking to Roshan Satish, and he is the AI lead at MaintainX. A lot of you probably know MaintainX. I've had some of their folks on before, and we're going to jump into a very, very hot topic today, and that is AI, because I'm always talking to people in the CMMS world, the maintenance management world, and some people know me as being kind of a skeptic on AI. And it's not that I'm a skeptic like I don't like it. It's more about what can it really do? Contextual data matters, all that kind of stuff. So we're going to jump into that. So Roshan, thank you for being here with me on CMMS Radio. The first thing I want to kind of tackle is with what you do, you're on your own front lines as far as building this out, seeing how it really works, making it happen. The first thing is, how are you bringing AI to the frontline teams? And these are the doers, the workers, the ones that are really getting it done, where our data starts. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, appreciate you for having me, Greg. Excited to be here. And I think that's a great starting point for the conversation. At the end of the day, that's our biggest focus is frontline workers from CMMS, from MaintainX as a platform overall, but especially for me on the AI front. That's where we see the highest usage. That's where we see a lot of the value. And at the end of the day, that's where the data is coming from. So from a frontline perspective, I'm sure we'll get into a lot of detail over the course of the conversation, but my biggest priority is building products that are integrated into people's workflows. Where we start is, what's your day-to-day like? What are the tasks that you complete? What does the end of your day look like? What do you report? What do you write down? What do you keep in your head? And we try to use that as a starting point for, where are the areas we can be most helpful, instead of prioritizing the flashiest or the most advanced use cases. At the end of the day, if we want people to use this, if we want it to get smarter over time, we need to convince them that it's helpful instead of being something that's top down or that they're told to use. We want to find those places where they actually reach for it and they think about it and say, this makes my day easier.
Yeah. So with that being said, is the way it's built into the platform. And, I always want to understand like what it's really doing rather than just pulling from random information. Is the way you're approaching AI for those frontline workers, looking specifically at the client's data and how the technician wants to interact and doing that, or is it something else?
It's a great question. It's a bit of both, but it definitely leans the client's data and the organization and their habits, their facility. But these models get more powerful every day, right? And they learn more just from reading, at this point, the entire internet. So there is some interesting things that they know. But the biggest pieces of value that we see, and the most important information that we show technicians especially, comes directly from their facility, from their coworkers, from information that they've collected, whether that's SOPs that are generated over time or reports about issues that they've had, or 1,000-page manuals from OEMs. We look at that first, and if there's help that the AI can provide beyond that, it'll try its best to do that. But for us, very cautiously, we want to avoid those cases where it makes wild guesses. It adds a bunch of information that's not necessary. And as I'm sure you know, that's a very common case.
Yeah. That's and I know we're going to be talking about that in a little bit, because that's always one that I want to bring up when it comes to AI. I like something that you said though. You used the word model, and that's really important for everyone out there, because AI, artificial intelligence, is actually machine learning. It's modeling. It's large language models or language learning models, right? So that's important. I'm really glad that you said that. So when it comes to this concept of an assistant, right? For you leveraging the AI, so you have an AI assistant that is there for the technician. You already talked about how it will look at the existing client database information. It will pull from the internet and information, which for me, that's where I'm like, whoa, we got to make sure we're getting good, strong, solid information rather than, it's got to have context. But are they, so they're using it on a mobile device typically, and they're doing their work at a piece of equipment, or maybe some facility work in the facility. It's not a piece of equipment, maybe it's floor work, so whatever, right? Plumbing. How would you describe that they start the interaction? Like at what point do they start the interaction, and then where is it really filling those gaps and keeping them on the move?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. A few different places. I think I like this idea of their workflow and of the fact that they're on the field. I think that that's always on our mind. Is this needs to be mobile first. It needs to be easy to use, intuitive, and at the end of the day, I mean, nobody has the time to sit and write a 3 sentence, 4 sentence, or a paragraph long question. It needs to be quick and it needs to understand what they're asking about. So we think about that a lot, but even before we get into these more troubleshooting centric use cases or information centric use cases, there are lighter weight places where AI can help too, even just on data entry for meter readings, for example, on preventive maintenance across a facility. We do interesting things like track trends, we note anomalies, but some of the most value we see is just in incorrect data entry. It's
Mm,
this has an extra, value. It's usually 41. Today it's 411. Did you accidentally press one too many times? Or this usually has a decimal point. It's usually 23.5. Today it's 235. Did you forget to add this decimal point? And with those interactions, I mean, it's incredibly lightweight, but you just hit yes and say, oh, yeah, you're right. I don't want this information going in. That's an incorrect reading. A bunch of things might get triggered as a result of me inputting that number incorrectly. So it can be
yeah.
as simple as that. But on the other end of the spectrum, we have these more critical use cases where you're really trying to save time. And to really boil it down, even for tenured technicians who've been working on a machine for years, you can't possibly remember every single issue, every single error code, all of the history of work. This, I remember kind of that this happened 2 years ago, but what do we do? Who did I talk to even? Is that person still here? And that's where these more advanced use cases come into play, where you're on a work order, especially if it's reactive. Something breaks, the clock is ticking, and you're in the context of MaintainX, you get a work order, but it only has a single sentence of a description. It says this, this thing is broken. It could be almost anything. But the idea of Copilot is there's just a button that you press, and you can use your voice to ask it questions as well, and it'll pull exactly like you said from the most reliable information that we have. And to be transparent, if we don't have information, it'll say exactly that. It's like, unfortunately, I don't know. We don't have this. We haven't seen this before, or it hasn't been tracked. So we don't have something for you today. But if it does, it'll give them a structured response. They can even continue to ask questions, again, with their voice. If you ask a question about an error code, for example, it gives you an answer. You try to fix that. You can ask a follow up question and say, okay, now I get this different error code. Did I do something wrong? What should I do now? And over time, we even track those interactions for a single facility. So we'll say, last time we've seen a work order like this, here was the solution. You can skip the step of them having to ask in the first place, but
Mm.
slowly but surely, of course.
So I'm always kind of, so you've been dealing with AI, right? These models, machine learning, for a long time, right? Because I looked at your background, and we don't have to get too much into that, but I'm always concerned, where is it really getting its data? And we already talked about that it'll pull from the client's existing database, series of data, the activities they've done, which is good because it, being the AI tool, right, the co-pilot, can look, see, and learn. But how it learns is what I'm always kind of fascinated by, and where I'm really like a little bit of caution. Do you have a certain, and I don't even know if you're allowed to talk about this, but like a certain approach as to how you and your team are building it? Are you looking at things like maintenance and reliability best practices? Are you looking at maybe facilities management and facilities maintenance best practices? Is it a mixture of both? Can you give us anything on that? And the reason I'm asking that is just it helps folks that might see and listen to this to build their own context around, wow, I like that approach. Oh, I didn't know that, something like that. Can you give me anything on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great question. Happy to answer it transparently. I think that the same thing applies. We're cautious at the end of the day. We want to make sure that we only pull from reliable information. We don't want to just throw information at the model because we can. But it's a combination of sources at the end of the day. We look at one of the strongest pieces of collateral that we get is service manuals, and they're tricky to get sometimes. So it's an optimistic case. But if we have this, 600-page manual that goes through a ton of different things that you could solve, there's probably someone in a facility who has flipped through that or even used that to generate SOPs or just remembers all of the common things and doesn't have to look at it anymore. But if you're a new technician coming in and looking like at something like that, it's incredibly overwhelming. And if you have to solve something quickly, you basically can't. So we, on one hand, want to give it this knowledge base to pull from so that you can resolve those issues. But from the training, from the model piece, what makes it smarter is definitely, over time, people interact with it more and more. We see common questions, we track issues. But from a customer perspective, what we prioritize is their own value and the structure they get out of it. So in the Copilot, you do get an answer, but we actually recommend that users give feedback on that answer and say, this was a good one, this is a bad one. And maybe even more importantly, that they generate something from it. So if they have a procedure in MaintainX, an SOP, a set of steps to solve a particular problem, you can generate that right from Copilot as well. You can add that to the existing work order. You can add it to your library. You can even improve an existing procedure. And to us, that's the best case scenario because over time, that's the reliable info that we pull from the most. It's a real piece of content in your library instead of 5 or 6 pages pulled from the OEM manual. We see how you've customized it. We see how you've used it. Over time, we even see what tends to fail on that procedure. And that's how we get more specific, but also how we give the customers concrete value over time. You shouldn't have to ask the question at the end of the day. Maybe the first time you see the issue, you do, but the next time you see the issue, we should just get ahead of it, and there should be something that already exists.
Yeah, the more I hear about this, and I do think about it often, and I talk about it sometimes, maybe often. I'm not sure. Other people would have to tell you that, but I keep thinking about this other thing. So, not much of a curveball, but kind of related. Where I'm thinking, I just want to kind of throw this out there and see what you think, or if maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. So, you think about our folks that might have gray beards, right? They're older.
Right.
They're the experts. They're the people that are in our various manufacturing and other types of facilities, hospitals, schools, whatever, right? And they really do know and understand things differently than there are some, up and comers and a little bit younger and whatever that are learning from them. They've been around them. But I keep thinking from this AI perspective, it would be really cool if our experts, the guys and gals that we sometimes call gunslingers, the ones that really know, right? Maybe you call them a machine whisperer, whatever. If they can kind of have like periodic interactions with it that feed the knowledge into the system, or better yet, and I'm just spitballing here, right? I'm imagining and being excited about this. All right, how would we really use AI from stuff I've seen over my years or that I hear about, where they understand a procedure that cannot really be addressed by the OEM manual, the specs on preventive maintenance, the specs on corrective responses, and hey, where should you really be looking for, the root cause of that failure that's coming or that happened. I just wonder, have you guys thought of anything like that, or have existing tech around the AI, around the Copilot that can learn from a particular individual where like they're almost like sitting down and taking John's story or Jill's story about how this really works in our facility?
Yeah, Greg, it's a great question, and I don't think it's a curveball at all. Honestly, it's one of the biggest challenges we face, but it's also one of the biggest opportunities for us. I think at the end of the day, we're not trying to replace any of these individuals. I just don't think it's possible, and I think that exactly like you said, there are a lot of younger technicians who are excited about this technology or actually need it day to day. They just don't have the information. They've never seen something before, and the alternative is going and asking that person, right, and finding
Right.
them wherever they happen to be and bringing them to the machine. But that knowledge transfer doesn't go anywhere, right? They might learn over months and years, but it takes a long time. And we see these challenges in a shifting workforce and people retiring, and it's easy to lose all of that value. So we think about it all the time. But the other hand is for those tenured technicians, for those gunslingers, I like that term, you I shouldn't say you cannot. You can, but it's difficult. It's much more difficult to give them incentives to do this in the first place because they don't need it. Like you said, they already know the
Right.
answers. They probably know more than the OEM. They've seen these machines for years and they know what's specific about them, what's been customized. Maybe this particular machine tends to break in a way that's not typical, right? And to try to close that loop a bit, we do have a feature that we're releasing in the next couple of weeks, actually. So it's great timing on that question. We basically just call AI assisted work order reports. So it's the idea is even if you don't use Copilot through the work order, you completed it. It's all good. You know, maybe it was non-typical, but you fixed it. You didn't need help. Once you click done on that work order, it pops up a screen that says tell your team how it went. And there's just a blinking microphone icon in the middle. We try to make it as easy as possible. And you know a lot more about this than I would, but our assumption is that even if they've done the work, they have to tell somebody at some point how it went. Maybe at the end of the day, in a huddle, maybe just describing it to a younger technician. So they have to do it at some point in some form, and a lot of times that's just with words. So we're trying to get in the middle of that workflow and saying, if you could, take 30 seconds, take a minute, take 5 if you want, and just tell Copilot how it went. Tell us what was difficult about it, what was interesting, what you think most people wouldn't know about the machine if you are one of those tenured technicians. And the AI will take the transcript, it'll transcribe those words. We use a voice model as well, though, that is tuned towards facilities. It assumes that there's going to be background noise, it assumes that there's going to be multiple people talking at the same time. So it's really good at figuring out who's talking about this work order and only using those words, and not getting stuck on the background noise. But then it'll take that and combine it with the procedure, if there is one, with the description, with any comments on the work order, and come up with this report essentially at the end that is consistently structured. It goes through diagnosis, it goes through repair. If there is a manual, it'll go through even recommendations that the AI has. And that's one of those ways we try to capture that knowledge that just doesn't exist anywhere today outside of people's heads. The biggest value being over time, and this is brand new, so I'm optimistic about this, but we'll see and we'll adjust. If people, especially tenured technicians, start to use this, week over week, month over month, all of those summaries, all of that structure goes into Copilot as well. So the next time somebody has this question, it's not just going to pull from the manual. It's going to say, oh, 6 months ago, this occurred. This person said this is how they solved it. Here's the reference. You can link the work order. And slowly but surely, we add all of those specifics that we can't get from another source to the knowledge that Copilot pulls from.
I love that stuff. And here, where I was really going with it, you already hit upon it, and that's that. When you have your CMMS and you're putting in all this information, a lot of us, used to think, well, you've got it, it's available. Well, a lot of people aren't going and looking at that. Where do they don't have the time, right? However, if we're gathering that and we're capturing what we sometimes call tribal knowledge, or the kind of boots on the ground, the guys and gals that are really doing it and understand it in a different way, that can impart that knowledge onto you. When you capture that in this way, it becomes a more useful repository of information because it's a little bit more interactive. And my real vision for that was that every company that's leveraging your platform, that is building out this database, provided it's not a bunch of garbage data and they're putting stuff like the work order's done, oh, everything's fine. They got to put a little more detail, not a novel or anything, but then you add in this valuable kind of closeout step where, yep, we followed all the procedures, but when we got to step 3, where we're supposed to tighten this belt, we ran into a problem with the pulley having an issue. So you want to keep an eye on that in the future. Well, this starts to feed in information that could become kind of internal learning materials for people to, because I like the idea of reinforcing. We've got the CMMS. We're using it for all this good stuff. We're getting a bunch of stuff done, but we now have past, present, and potentially future views as to what's happening. And now maybe at some point, each client can go in and say, hey, let's have this thing make us like little workshops or something for our team. Not for everybody in the world, just for us, that help people do a periodic, in some industries, they call it an in-service. And what it means is people have to go through some regular cadence of reinforcing and relearning and seeing what's new, what's the same, what's changed, all that. So I was just kind of spitballing that idea out there. And I want everybody to hear about it because instead of, like looking at the shiny technology and the buzzwords and going, that stuff doesn't matter. Sure, it doesn't, but there's ways that it can make an impact. So that's why I wanted to talk about all that. So that was great. How then, when we talk about Copilot or AI in general within your platform, is it helping, like offering real insights to leadership at organizations that leverage the platform?
Great question. It builds on exactly the foundation that you just described. I think we will always prioritize the end users, the frontline workers. That's where almost all of this value comes from. And just like you said, the more reliable that data is, the better. Not even even more dramatic than that. If you don't have that reliability of the data, if you don't have that level of detail, there's nothing really you can bubble up. You can kind of pretend to, if I could go that far, and you can build charts and dashboards and all of that, but they don't drive action in most of these cases because there's nothing specific about it. It's kind of a directional trend. Maybe it's reliable, maybe it's not. But we want to build on this foundation of knowledge. We want to start pulling that reliable information, especially like you had mentioned just before this, in places where people don't write it down today. And I completely understand that too. I like it, it's the same, for us at MaintainX building out this technology. If we have an issue trying to build something in the platform and it causes a problem, we'll fix the problem, of course. But nobody wants to sit after they've done that and type out, a whole page of reports on how they solved the problem. They just said, I did it and let's move on. So we're trying to build more incentive, more easy paths for people to provide all that information. All of that bubbles up even on a first level. So on, the level of a maintenance manager or a regional manager, if you have multiple facilities that have the same machines and you're enabling Copilot across them, then we see these insights across all of the machines as well and say, these are common problems that you have specific to your organization, but not specific to one location. So even on that level, we want to start sharing that information from facility to facility. Above that, as you start to get into the regional level or even the national or global level, once you have this reliable information, once you have that level of detail, you can get into more of these reporting use cases or these process optimization use cases, from supply chain and purchasing to asset life cycles to even just how do I take the best practices from one of my facilities and make sure that everyone does the same things. So we are starting to get into that world, especially over the course of the next 6 or 7 months. We will start to focus more on those reporting use cases. But to bring it full circle, to me, the priority when we build out these products is not how complicated can we make the visualizations, how many knobs can we put on these dashboards to make sure you can get the answer. To me, the more valuable thing is how can AI help you actually move the needle on this front? I'm looking at this data. What does this mean, right? Give me an interpretation of this data. What's changed since the last time I pulled this report a month ago? And after that, most optimistically, here's a set of recommendations. Here's, a set of SOPs from a particular facility, or here's a group of people who happen to know a lot about these machines. We recommend that you adopt their approach. We recommend that you change this purchasing pattern, even from preventive maintenance. This machine seems over-maintained. This machine seems under-maintained. We recommend changing around your schedule or your frequency, outside of those, like the habits that have been formed previously.
And then, so with all of that, it's almost a perfect time to segue into, if you're allowed to share any really specific, you don't have to name company names, but maybe like, this kind of a company or this industry where you've had kind of a use case and a success story. Is there anything on that you're allowed to share that you could help us to kind of color in the context?
There's a few. I mean, MaintainX has a diverse customer base. What I'll call out, and just to be fully upfront about this, is the product has been out for two months now, 2 or 3 months. So it is early, in the curve, to make sure that we land on these use cases and maximize the value. But in a lot of situations, we've seen companies, couple major manufacturers. I do want to keep it relatively abstract,
Yeah.
but just to make sure that they have all of those procedures in place. And going through reactive work orders are the biggest gap, I think. And in a lot of cases, we see either requests come in when something breaks, where they just want to do something as quickly as possible, and they don't actually capture any value from that. Instead, using Copilot to generate a procedure and generate an SOP from the manual and from other sources, and have that for the next time the same issue pops up. Or for a technician receiving something that has very little context, from a frontline perspective, couple of cases where we've seen them actually build that habit to say, oh, my first instinct is let me ask Copilot to add a procedure here or to at least generate a description for this work order so that I know exactly what I'm doing here, instead of, kind of flying blind or just checking the box.
So what you are seeing, even though it's early, I mean, really early to really see what it's really going to do, right? We need lots and lots of data and verified data and all that kind of stuff. But you're seeing buy-in, you're seeing interaction, you're seeing that it is potentially going to make big impacts, but it's early on making some impact nonetheless. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. Yeah, I believe that. Obviously, I'm a bit biased. It's our product, but I
Yeah.
think that from a willingness to purchase perspective, yeah, absolutely. I think people understand the vision. I think that the pieces around adoption and the value in their workflow resonate. That's for sure. But that's only half the battle. I think on the more exciting front to me, from an adoption perspective, I mean the biggest challenge is not even what the solution is capable of doing. I think the biggest challenge is just forming the habit and getting people to remember that it exists and have that instinct, because that's the biggest difference in the workflow is instead of going and finding someone else, instead of commenting, tagging someone on the work order and waiting, at least give Copilot a shot first. And we're slowly but surely seeing that. And it takes a lot more than just MaintainX. I think it takes facilities, like you mentioned. I think this idea of in service, this idea of reevaluating your processes, and in some structured way, forming the habit and saying, here's a set of work orders that are for nothing but trying Copilot. Like, go ask questions on this. I've just assigned, an end of week task to fill in like this request with more information. Add a procedure here. Use Copilot. And it definitely takes time. Even for me, I mean, having used AI features for years and years, there are situations where I do something and then I remember, oh, I should have just done that with an AI tool or with an assistant, but I did it from scratch because I
Yeah.
didn't remember that the thing existed. So I think we're trying to solve for both sides of that equation, building more features for executives, building more power on a regional or even bigger level. But in the meantime, also really trying to help however we can with just getting people to have the instinct and getting people to trust in the output so that they use it more and more.
Yeah. Wow. That's so. Yes, as recently as yesterday, I was in a discussion about AI and the one that everybody uses for all kinds of stuff, right? It's a thing. We go and create stuff. We ask it questions, and it was a little bit of a debate. It was someone that's not in our industry, and but they might be able to quickly understand the concepts of maintenance and all that. And we landed on, this is where my next question is going. We landed on this concept of drift and hallucinations. And I was agreeing that, wow, yeah, you can do all that cool stuff you just described to me when it comes to a GPT, right? You go in and you can have it do all this stuff. And I said, but what's really important to understand about AI, about machine learning, is the concept of drift, or AI drift. Maybe we're going to start calling it now. I'm seeing that term. And I know some pretty heavy hitters in the industry that have helped educate me. So I'm not the expert. I'm leaning on the real deal experts that I know, like the I'm talking global heavy hitters, right? So with drift and the idea of hallucinations, where you can get false positives and things that are misinterpreted and it makes things up. And I told this individual, you just have to be mindful, where is it getting its information, and try to always scrutinize. And here's why: because I think there's this potential to kind of be lazy about it and not think about it. So whereas you were describing how you went and did something without it and were like, man, I could have used this, then there's the opposite of that. People that are only using that and they're not second guessing it or anything like that. I think there's instances where that's great, where we know what we know. But when we don't know what we don't know, and these things like drift, where it's not quote unquote staying in its lane, it's kind of doing what it wants. It has lost, kind of hitting the mark on how it treats the data through the model, through the programmatic model that was built. Hopefully I'm getting this kind of right.
Definitely.
What do you what do you have as your unique approach to the AI and avoiding those hallucinations? And for anybody out there, when I say hallucinations, it's when AI makes a mistake, but it doesn't know that it's made a mistake. It's leveraging the wrong data, or it literally, I mean, is making something up. So what can you share with us about that?
Yeah, a lot of thoughts on this front. I mean, it's an ongoing challenge, that's for sure. And I don't know if it'll ever have a perfect solution. But these models, I mean, they're getting more powerful. These hallucination issues are getting less obvious, but they still exist. That's for sure. And I think there's a lot of different approaches that we at MaintainX have taken, that a lot of other companies I've seen in the tech industry have taken to mitigate this. And I think the first thing that comes to mind is just customization for an industry, for a use case. For us in manufacturing and in maintenance, the stakes are a lot higher, honestly, than a lot of other AI products. And we're very conscious of that. And we encode that into every part of the model and the platform. It knows at each step. There's a lot of, call it a loop, essentially, where we kind of have it validate itself. We have it reference source material. Even in product, you get an answer, but it tells you exactly where the answer came from. It shows you the pages. You can look at it. You can verify it. But from a habit perspective, we make sure that it understands the workflow that it's in, the platform that it's in, and the context of the question. And I think that that's a piece of it for sure. Is just grounding it and making sure through rigorous testing that you try to break it at first. And honestly, from customers' perspective as well, it's ironic to me because I've seen a lot, like the demos that are very flashy, and it's a very powerful use case. It's a complicated 50-step procedure. It gets it right, 50 for 50. That's amazing. But some of the most engaged customer reactions that I see are actually in demos where it asks something that it knows will be confusing. And it says exactly that. It says, here's the information I have. I think you might have been referring to this other thing, though. Let me know if that's the case. Or just, I don't have the answer at all. I apologize. And hopefully that information becomes available at a later date. That to me, I think, gets a lot more buy-in than the hallucination case or even the drift case, where it doesn't have enough information, so it fills in the gaps however it can. It says, I think this is the way you should do this. I think this is the information you're looking for, but I don't know for sure. And I think the second part is very dangerous, especially in this industry, because of the machines, the people's safety that's on the line, but also just from a pure adoption perspective. I think it only takes one or two of those cases to get people to never use the tool again. I think that you see that happen one time, and and you reference the answer, or you just know the answer and you're testing it and it gets it wrong. You can only have that happen a couple of times before people are unwilling to try it. And I think it's a very challenging battle for us in product and in AI to get that faith back, or to even just get the incentive to try it again, right? 6 months later, like give it another shot. We think we fixed it. People still hesitate because they don't really believe that anything has changed. So it's tricky. It's a step-by-step process, but the customization, how embedded it is into the workflow, is a huge piece of that. But the last thing I'll say, and I know it's been a very long answer, we have a lot of thoughts
Okay.
on this, is even with all of that in mind, we still heavily recommend that our customers take it with a grain of salt, look at it, make sure it's correct, especially in any cases where there's a safety protocol involved or something is dangerous. We have disclaimers in the product. We sometimes have disclaimers from the model itself that say, this is the information I have, but I noticed that you didn't provide any safety collateral. I don't know what the safety protocol is for this, so please keep that in mind.
Yeah.
So just a very cautious approach that still requires human in the loop and feedback. And especially in those cases where we get something wrong, let us know, hit the feedback button, tell us why that was, especially if the information does exist. So we just want to make sure that people are still involved in that process too.
Yeah. So it almost sounds like more of a, hey, this is built in a way to augment. It's not built to necessarily be like a set it and forget it, right? Because that's not a great idea ever. Not much exists that is set it and forget it in this world, let alone in the software world. And then more specifically in maintenance and reliability, preventive maintenance and all that. That's part of the problem is people set things up and then they're off doing their stuff. And the idea that it can keep that awareness, or at least put it in front of somebody that, hey, you might want to double check this. I like that. The other thing that's really interesting about this is I think we all agree that it's still really early. We don't know what it's really going to become. Some of the some of the sheen and the shine around AI and a lot of the other buzzwords that I love to just smash and crush and bat around.
That's fair.
I think some of that luster might wear off, and then we'll get to the realities of what it can really, really do. So this has all been really good. Really interesting though that this idea of drift and hallucination for a lot of folks out there throughout the industry, it's lost on them. They don't really realize it. So I'm glad you have an awareness on that. I would like to, at this point, switch you into the fun question segment that I like to have people suffer through their first time on CMMS radio. You ready for that?
Fair enough. Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So there are no wrong answers on any of this stuff. These are not gotcha questions or anything like that. It's just fun stuff, man. So, first question: what is your favorite music genre? Whatever you want to say on that.
Ooh, good question. It varies, that's for sure. Over time, it's changed. I also live in Manhattan, so I think that over the years, I'm surrounded by different flavors. Um, these days, I like some interesting genres of electronic music. Honestly, I think there's a lot of call it like multi-ethnic electronic music. It's like a fusion restaurant, except for different cultures that
Yeah.
has instruments that you don't see that often and good beats and is just good to dance to. So I've gravitated towards that recently. In my past, mix classic rock, a lot of hip hop, some jazz. I used to play French horn for a lot of years, so I do like classical as well. But yeah, it
Yeah.
changes day to day.
Good. Good stuff, man. I like it. I like it. And that's why these are wide open, man. This is just fun times, getting to know you a little bit. And I think music kind of transcends literally everything. So it's a question I always like to ask for this one.
Yeah,
Next
couldn't
one
agree.
is number 2, fun question. What is your favorite sport or hobby? And on the sport, it can be one that you like to root for. It doesn't have to be one that you actually play.
It's a great question. Um, From a team sport perspective, I mean, honestly, last few years, I have not been keeping up with a lot of the major franchises. I would say, and a lot of that's just like a time thing, to be completely honest. But I do like F1 off late. Been following races more closely, and a lot of that is I don't know if you've heard of the Netflix show Drive to Survive, but it's like a condensed, few episode version of an entire season, which I love. But on the non-team sports side, I do love to follow all things, sort of Red Bull. I love downhill mountain biking, skiing, snowboarding, things on that front. Before I lived in Manhattan, I lived in Seattle, so I loved doing anything that got me closer to the mountains. So I really like that sort of world as well.
Cool. Cool. Yeah, I like it. And the F1 is really picked up in popularity in our world versus, in Europe where it is always popular, and a lot of people are getting into that. So that's a cool one. And, with the, extreme sports, Red Bull type stuff, I mean, that's good stuff too. All right, here's the big one, man. No wrong answers.
Sounds
What
good.
is what is your philosophy, perspective, opinion, anything at all when it comes to this concept of work-life balance?
Ooh, it's a serious one.
Yeah.
Work-life balance. I mean, it's interesting. I think there's a lot of variables, honestly. It comes down to the city you live in, your habits, your family life, your pets if you happen to have them. I think it's pivotal though, but I think that my approach to it is, and this is a bit of a plug, but I love companies like MaintainX. I like working in a place where I'm passionate about the problem. I think it's engaging. I think it's challenging enough, and there's no immediate solution. Every day is fresh. Every day is new, and there's something to tackle. And I think this conversation reflects that a lot from a work perspective. I've been in AI for a long time, but I've not been in manufacturing for a long time. And I think it's a really great place to apply these technologies. So from that perspective, I really enjoy and appreciate my work. That said, from a life perspective, I think the balance is key. I mean, your job is only one component of what you do and who you are. And I think just engaging both of those halves, and mixing them where you can, but just making sure that you build these sustainable habits and prioritize yourself from time to time too are very key.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. And I always say I like stuff, but it's always interesting to hear what someone's unique perspective is, what their experience is, what they think about that, not to be right or wrong, but to be inspiring others to think about it or to even themselves agree or disagree. It's about critical thinking. And with all of this, I just want people thinking about what they're doing. I want them, like, if they engage with vendors for their CMMS, like MaintainX, where they can ask them really hard questions. And I don't mean trap questions. I mean questions that are important to them, because all this is about the maintenance journey, the client's journey, because without our clients being able to thrive with the platform based on the right kind of guidance, they got to have basic fundamentals in place really strong. Otherwise, it's always going to be a challenge. Without them, we don't have anything, right? We have to go get different jobs. We have to, figure things out. So this has been really fun for me. I always like showcasing the insights, but I like at the same time getting to know the individual that's on. So I thank you for that. When people get in touch with you, what would you want people to reach out via LinkedIn, or is there another way they can get in touch?
No, LinkedIn works great. I would really appreciate the people reaching out. Love having these conversations, and I think, like you said a moment ago, there's just such a great human component to all of this, especially for the companies we work with, and for me personally, for all of the learnings from just talking to people on front lines, especially, and understanding not just their workflow, but who they are and their backgrounds. And I think it's so interesting, especially to folks at companies like MaintainX, because a lot of us come from the tech industry or finance or marketing or something along those lines. So it's a whole world of learnings, and I would
Yeah.
absolutely love it if people reach out. I'm happy to answer any and all questions about MaintainX, about AI, and just learn more about who they are.
Yeah. And I would add to that, for you and the team and, anybody out there really, that keep learning more and more about the front line, about what maintenance management really is, what it actually is, and get to know some of those people, keep talking to them. And Roshan, it's been great having you on here, man. I appreciate you being with me on CMMS Radio for us to learn about your perspectives on AI.
No, thank you so much, Greg. It's been a great time. Really appreciate you having me.
Yeah, you got it, man. Thank you very much. Did you find this episode helpful? Please send us some feedback, suggest a topic, or ask a question. Reach out to CMMS Radio if you need a co-pilot on your CMMS project. Visit CMMSradio.com and use the What's on Your Mind link. Thank you for tuning in to CMMS Radio, your resource for all things CMMS, from selection to implementation, to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey.